independent journalist, Substack author, podcaster, Matt Taibbi worked closely with Musk as one of the authors of the Twitter files. Matt, good to see you. Glad to see you survived the election. All right, so you got me? Can you hear me? You got your sound on and all that?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry, yes.
What are you, a novice? You know, you got those expensive cans on your head and you don't even know what you're doing. All right, so
I'm sorry about that. My apologies.
Let's start with the FEMA director. So here's the allegation. You didn't do what you were supposed to do because this is Trump land and you didn't want to. She says no. Here's her being asked by Democrat Goldman about this.
Any type of misinformation that creates some type of mistrust in the federal government creates a lack of opportunity for individuals that have been impacted by these disasters to get the assistance that they need and that they're eligible for.
And do you think that there were some people who did not receive disaster assistance because of this misinformation by Donald Trump?
We will never know if there are people that should have applied and didn't, but there is the possibility that individuals may not have applied for assistance because of what they were reading across social media.
Now, again, I think it's a blame game, but it did seem in this hearing, to the extent that it was about what matters, that they did what they ordinarily do. Were they caught by surprise? Yes. Did they not plan? Obviously, yes. Are they struggling in the aftermath? Yes, but it wasn't political. In terms of transparency, how does this work for you?
I mean, look, I think I don't know the particulars of the FEMA discussion all that well. I think they made a big deal about misinformation when actually it was pretty typical politics, complaining about an insufficient response and a low promise of early funds. And what they really wanted to do was have some kind of control over the flow of information about the storm. So, you know, it's 6 of one, 1/2 dozen of the other. I agree with you. I think this is mostly just typical politics.
Elon Musk, you know him. What do you think about choosing him to look at efficiencies in government?
Well, look, one thing I will say about Elon, and I've had, you know, some not entirely positive experiences with him, but he came into Twitter promising to run the company with a fraction of the staff, and he did it. You know, it wasn't long after he arrived that most of the staff was gone, and the company is still going. Now, is it going better than it was before? I don't know. That's a different question. But look, the mandate was to dismantle the deep state and to take a look at some of these agencies that have gigantic budgets and almost no oversight, particularly the intelligence agencies and the military. And if they're actually going to take a bite out of it, it would be this kind of person who would have to do it.
So explain why it's this kind of person. What sophistication do you know him to have that he could look at something like an intelligence agency and decide what is fat versus, you know, what is meat and bone?
None. I wouldn't expect him to have any sophistication. I mean, I'm sure he's quite familiar with intelligence services and has had plenty of contact with people who work there. I know for a fact that there are a lot of people in Twitter who worked in the intelligence services, but that's not the issue. The issue is that only an outsider is going to come into this world and make deep, deep cuts into personnel and, you know, mission scope and that sort of thing. And that was what they ran on. They ran on that, those kinds of cuts. And it would have to be this kind of person who was just determined to come in willy-nilly and just take big swipes of an axe at these bureaucracies. And that's who he is. So for better or worse, that's who he is.
You are a very classic, clear-eyed thinker in my experience. What is your take on this idea of normalizing? Where are we in terms of what the right perspective is to have on people saying, oh, you're not supposed to pick a guy like Elon? And shame on you, Cuomo, for not just pounding Trump about every lie he tells all the time. And there's no other coverage that's warranted of that. Normalizing. What do you think that effect was on us in this election and what we should see it as now?
So there are a lot of terms like this that get bandied around in the media. Another one that we've seen a lot lately is sane washing. It's this idea, and it hits the ear in a very snobbish way when ordinary people hear media people talking about, oh, you're normalizing this figure or that figure. That is very offensive to somebody who voted for a politician specifically so that they could nominate whoever they wanted to run these positions. That's how democracy works. And to have sort of entrenched Washington media talking about, oh, you can't normalize this person or that person, it reinforces to me the idea that these people don't understand that the people are ultimately in control in this country. Whether you like their choices or not, this is how it's designed to be. And they shouldn't complain that way, I don't think.
What is your best sense of optimism in this administration and your biggest concern?
Well, my best sense of optimism is on the speech issue, which I've been working on for, 2 or 3 years now, beginning with the Twitter file stuff. And, a lot of the issues that we looked at were incredibly complicated and would have taken somebody with a high level of expertise to really even understand these issues. But we've already seen the nomination of somebody like Brendan Carr to the FCC. It's pretty clear he knows most of those issues pretty well and is going after exactly the things that we reported on, which is satisfying to me personally. The thing that I worry about is exactly what you talked about before, which is this idea that sometimes parties end up in a race to the bottom. They will use the same tactics that were used against them to pursue their own political enemies. And there's going to be enormous temptation within the Trump government to do things like go after media organizations they don't like. And they can't do that. If they end up doing that, it will be a disaster, because then we'll have both parties using these sort of unconstitutional means to go after each other.
What would be the best change that Carr could bring to the FCC?
Well, going after things like federal funding of fact-checking organizations that downgrade companies based on political leanings or whether or not their narratives are pro-government or not. I think that's a serious issue. But mostly just keeping the intelligence services and the enforcement agencies out of the content moderation business. I think that would be a huge step, and he seems to want to do that.
Do you think that there will be anything done on what we do about content moderation? Do you believe that that is an issue for federal regulation, as we heard from Zuckerberg? Or do you think you let the market decide and have different platforms make different rules, and we'll see who likes what best?
Well, the American system is pretty explicit in saying that the government has no role in that particular arena. There are laws that I think we need to adjust, probably. Like, for instance, like libel laws. The way they used to work back in the days before the internet with newspapers, I think was pretty functional. But they clearly have broken down in the internet age when there's so much content you can't possibly have that many lawsuits. So there needs to be new processes to deal with those sorts of offenses, but we can't have, a government enforcement squad going after misinformation and disinformation, because that will lead to, I think, political temptation to abuse those authorities.
Yeah, I want to get Mr. Carr on the show, and I want to talk to him about what I believe is the key. The difference between Section 230, giving them immunity makes sense on one level because they can't control the content. As you say, it's flooding in from all over. I'll come after Taibbi for what happens on his Substack or his podcast. But, for them, there's just too much. Notice is the issue. When you are told that this is out there and you do nothing, now you have a problem. Matt Taibbi, to be continued. Great to have you. Thank you very much. And if I don't speak to you, have a great Thanksgiving. I'm thankful for you. Hey, thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget, click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.